Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with a couple of very non-traditional color scheme Christmas cards. I'm using the new Tim Holtz layered plaid wafer die set. There are two wafer dies that cut out the two different layers of plaid, and then there's a third wafer die that just cuts out like a matte layer that's slightly larger. So I die cut some smooth white cardstock with the plaid wafer dies, and then I pulled out a rainbow of Distress Oxide ink because why not? Why not rainbow Christmas cards? So the ink blending, super quick and easy. I just used blending brushes, started with the yellow because that's just what I always do when it comes to rainbows. You can start with any color you want, but I did the pink, the orange, and the yellow on one layer of the plaid. And I used picked raspberry, mustard seed, and carved pumpkin. So blended those together super, super quick. I'm just working on some of my Simon grid paper just so that I'm not getting ink all over the place because that's usually what happens. So I'm going to do the pink, orange, yellow on that layer. And then the second layer, I'm going to use Mowed Lawn, Salty Ocean, and Wilted Violet. And the thing with this, of course, is the sky's the limit. You know, I'm doing rainbow here, but you could do like, if you wanted to do more traditional Christmas colors, you could do like different shades of green because there's a bunch if you're going with Oxide inks, but any inks are going to work. You do different shades of green, different shades of red. Again, if I had enough hours in the day, I was like, oh, you could do like a white back because I'm using a black background, but I was like, you could do a white background and then do like red and green plaid and, you know, die cut the sentiment from gold, or do red and gold with the black background and do the sentiment still in white or in green. Like I said, sky's the limit. And because it's plaid, this doesn't even need to be Christmas cards. It can be any season, holiday, you know, whatever you need a card for. Plaid is plaid, really. So I just did my blending using my blending brushes. And yeah, like I said, with this, the thinner plaid die cuts, I used the Mowed Lawn and then the Salty Ocean, and then I'll go in with the Wilted Violet. And because I used oxides, one, that also sped it up. But because these are die cut plaid pieces, it's not the same as when you're blending on like a solid background. So you're not worried about like the blends, you know, getting that smooth, perfect blend. You don't have to worry about it because you're not going to see it. So the backgrounds, I die cut with the largest just rectangle wafer die in that set. And I die cut it from black cardstock. And then I grabbed some packaging. I save a lot of my packaging, especially this was packaging that came from like cardstock packages. I will link to an option of clear bags that people can use because I have had people ask, they're like, I don't have extra packaging. What can I use to do something similar? You know, you want something thin to do flat shaker cards. I'll link to a set of clear bags they're like over 6 inches. So you can get 2 per piece. And it's like a pack of 100 for around $10. It's super cheap. So anyway, I'll have a link to that. But I'm just using packaging I had that I just set aside. I have just a container of it. And it's cut slightly bigger than my background. And on the back of this, I'm using Simon's Terrific tape that I just showed in their Cozy Hugs, in the Cozy Hugs release and review video I did the other day. Score tape also works. I prefer what I call a dry adhesive like this versus using a liquid adhesive because otherwise you're just going to have to sit forever and let it dry. This is faster. So I sealed up 3 sides. You leave the 4th side open and then you fill it with your shaker bits. So you can use whatever you want. I'm using some Trinity Stamps Gold Star embellishments, which, oh, chef's kiss. At the moment, these are sold out. I used them in a recent video and yeah, love. Hopefully they can get restocked soon because they're fabulous. But really any sort of like confetti is going to work. I went with the gold, but like silver would work. Anything holographic, rainbow confetti, you know, anything. So I filled up the shaker with that and then sealed the final side. And then I used my scissors to cut off along the corners. When you fold over that packaging, it'll sometimes overlap and you'll see it from the front. So I just trim that off with my scissors. And then I've got my fabulous little flat shaker, which I can't stop playing with. So I'm going to repeat that process with the second piece and the second piece of this packaging. So you apply the adhesive, you fold it over, and then I just work my way around so that I've got 3 sides sealed up. And then the 4th side, I apply the adhesive just so it's there, but I don't remove the backing, of course, until I fill it. So I've got all 3 sides sealed up, and then fill it with my little star confetti. And again, I just eyeball it. Just depends. Sometimes I like to overfill them, especially with flat shakers. You know, you can get away with adding more, but it just depends. So once I was happy with how much is in there, sealed up that 4th side, trimmed off the excess. And then to adhere these plaid panels together, I'm using just my craft tacky glue. I'm using the bottle that I have the fine metal tip on. I just had ordered this metal tip, I've mentioned it in other videos, and I just screwed it on to the bottle. Didn't have to do anything fancy. And then I just keep a stainless steel sewing pin in the metal nozzle, and it doesn't clog, and it's great for my little fine detail bits. So I just applied the adhesive around the perimeter of this smaller plaid. And then I apply adhesive just on those thicker lines. So just those like 4 thicker lines. There's no need to apply adhesive to the whole thing. One, that's going to take forever and that's just extra finicky. You don't need it. So I applied the adhesive and then I adhered the thinner plaid on top of the thicker and I alternated it. So I did one direction and then the other one I just flipped it around and adhered it in the opposite direction. It just gives it a different look. And then to adhere these to the shakers, I'm using glossy accents. You can use craft tacky, that's fine. I just chose glossy accents because I'm adhering it to something clear and shiny so that if any of the glossy accents does happen to ooze out when everything's drying, you're not going to notice it because glossy accents is also clear and shiny. So this one was much easier to add the adhesive to. There's more wider areas. And same thing, that's the only place I applied the adhesive to. I'm not putting it on any of those little thin lines. It's not necessary. So I adhered that on top of my shakers, and then I actually just set them underneath my MISTI, just something large and flat, to hold everything down, let it dry. So while it's drying, I die cut some scraps using the Marion Bright Wafer die from Tim Holtz Bold Text Christmas die set. And I'm going to stack all these together. This took probably the most amount of time, but it's another one of those sort of almost mindless things. So it's like I'm sitting, watching my show, adhering the layers together. You could also use just the outline. I had thought about that, but I decided I wanted just the letters so that more of the plaid would show. So I was like, I'll take the extra time. So I did 2 layers of just regular white cardstock, you know, the scraps that I die cut. The top layer I die cut from Simon's glossy white cardstock. So the sentiment will have that nice, like bright white glossy finish, which just gives it that little extra something with less effort. So I went along and just adhered all those letters together, stacked them all. And even while I say like this took the longest, it still didn't take that long. So I kept one of the outlines or a couple of the outlines and I used my scissors to cut at every single one of the letters. This just will make it easier to remove this once everything's adhered. So I'm using my little T-square ruler and I'm using that like outline piece from the words and centering that on my card and then temporarily adhering that into place with just some pixie tape. Any just very, very low tack tape will work. Again, just to hold it in place so that I can line up these letters. This was the fastest way to get them all lined up. So then I can adhere these letters into all of those openings. Now, because I cut those slits in this, it'll make this easier to remove, especially since all these letters are stacked. If you've ever done this before and you've tried to remove the cardstock after, sometimes it can be a major pain to try and remove the cardstock because it's like form fitted to what you adhered, if you know what I mean. So this will make sense in a second. So I just went along and adhered all of these letters to this plaid background with the craft tacky glue. Once I get these adhered, I did the same thing when I adhered the plaid to the shaker panel, is I'm going to stick this under my MISTI just to press all those letters down and let it completely adhere, you know, let that glue dry. So just a few minutes is good enough. So once everything is dry, I'm going to carefully remove that tape and then start removing that outline piece. And this is where all those little slits I cut with my scissors just make it so much easier to remove. I still take a little bit of time making sure that I don't like yank anything off or rip anything. And then it's good to go. So I've got that adhered. My card base is more smooth white cardstock. These were A2 size card bases, but the plaid background itself, those die cuts, are not A2 size. They're slightly shorter. So I just trimmed off about like 1/8 of an inch, basically, just so that everything looked a little more lined up. So still going in A2 envelope, it'll be good to go. So I trim down those card bases, and then for my little sentiments on the inside, and I'm going to add some to the outside as well, I just use sentiment strips from the Reverse Christmas Wishes sentiment strips that Simon just released. So I adhered sentiments to the insides of the cards, and then I adhered a companion sentiment to the card front as well. Once I've got that adhered, I'm going to use score tape to adhere these to my card base. You could use the Terrific tape that I used in the beginning. I have all the sizes of score tape. This is like the 1-inch score tape. So this was just faster. It's just quick and easy. But you could also use craft tacky glue. Anything's going to work, really. So I just like using the score tape because it's wider, it's faster, and it covers all those edges of the packaging so that everything's just going to stay in place. Nothing's going to fall apart, and it's good to go. So I'm going to press these onto my card fronts. And then these cards are complete. Let me grab them. They're behind me. So now let me get back here. So now I have these super bright and rainbow Christmas cards that also happen to be shakers. Love it. So very subtle shakers, it's not super obvious, but then when you sit and kind of look at it, you see the stars sort of moving. I love though, and that's why I kind of did it like this, because they're flat shakers, it doesn't move as much, which means the stars really kind of cover more of the background. I don't know. I love it. I love the holographic, fun look. And then the Merry and Bright, it's got that glossy finish, and then it says sending holiday cheer, thinking of you at Christmas. So these were a lot of fun. And as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have a supply list. I will link to all of the supplies I used. You can check that out in the description box below the video if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I would really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.